Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Call of the Wild. By Jack London. The Call of the Wild is a heartwarming story of a canine and human bond. Buck's journey from California to Alaska is chronicled in this tale, beginning with the day he was kidnapped and carried there. He had a difficult time there until he met John, who cared for him tenderly and with no expectations of anything in exchange. Buck returned to the forest after being disillusioned by everything. Throughout the work, the author teaches us that we should never give up because if we do, we will feel the sting of defeat. Every place has distinct laws, and we should be aware of this when we find ourselves in new situations. Jack London's masterpiece is The Call of the Wild. It's a quick read that keeps you guessing until the very end. The story takes place in the late 1800s, during the height of the American gold rush. We can see what life was like for the destitute in the freezing north as they searched for happiness. Their hopes were dashed when they arrived in a place where terrible living circumstances and death were the norm. The author shared his insights on civilization and progress with us through the dog Buck. Buck was a dog who lived in a large house amid serenity and contentment. Judge Miller was the name of his home, which he occupied in the warm state of California. Buck was having a good time keeping watch over his home and family. He had long, thick hair and was built like a tank. Buck was sold to an unknown buyer by a greedy servant. He decided to take him as far away from home as possible, by John Doe. Francois, a government employee, bought him and used him to deliver mail to far-flung destinations like Alaska. For the first time in his entire life, Buck saw snow, but he also confronted a harsh reality. He and the other dogs pulled the sled and delivered mail all day. Since Buck's bravery had earned him the title of pack leader, he took charge of the canines. The first lesson he needed to learn in order to survive came to him at this point. It was imperative that he never fall because if he did, the other dogs would rip him to shreds. In time, he was taken over by new owners. This trio of sleigh owners, Charles, Hal, and Mercedes, didn't have any prior knowledge of operating it. Additionally, the couple ignored other people's advice and neglected their dogs. Those who abused the dogs were responsible for their dwindling number of pets. Their dogs were particularly vulnerable to Hal's wrath. The sleigh came to a halt in front of John's cabin one winter day. Buck was exhausted and he was in a bad mood. A few blows from his owners convinced him to give up. Because he couldn't bear to see Hal stomping around on Buck, John decided to go up and confront him. Hal prepared to slash at John with his knife. After a long struggle, John was able to remove the knife. Buck was nowhere to be seen as the sleigh pushed forward. In the end, Hal ignored John's warnings about the weak ice and they all drowned in the river when the ice cracked. Buck remained in the company of John. We were on the verge of forming a lifelong friendship. Dogs respond with devotion and love when their owners treat them well, and John was no exception. Buck saved John from a river once and won him $1,600 on another occasion. It was time to put the money to good use, so John decided to invest it. He invested in some of the tools needed to find gold. They set off in search of riches in the bush. They discovered it, and the dogs were contently napping while they were at it. Then, Buck was swayed by the call of nature. He was being dragged farther and deeper into the woods by an unseen force. He was increasingly estranged from his best friend and best owner, John. He came across a wolf in the woods and then got the itch to go hunting, so he went in search of a moose. John was killed by the Indians while Buck was in the woods. Buck fought the Indians when he returned, causing them to flee. Buck was left alone after John's death, and he was heartbroken. The lake was visited by a wolf pack. Buck eventually joined them, returning to his roots and the nature from which he emerged after a long fight. He had total control over his life. Years later, the story of a wolf-like dog who came to the lodge to mourn was related. Buck, the hero of the story. He is the focus of every story. Because the author recounts his actions, emotions, and thoughts in great detail, we may get a sense of who he is as a person through the account. He has large eyes and a massive chest, making him a powerful and intimidating canine. He's a dependable pal who had a good time in the Golden State. His hair was long and thick, and he had a powerful physique. Having been kidnapped from his owners, he was forced into a new environment and had to learn to adjust. Due to the other dogs, he had to learn not to tumble and that only the strongest of dogs would make it out alive. When the wind picked up, he was able to detect it. This man had no fear of fighting to the death in the event of a battle. He cherished anyone who treated him with respect. John was a true buddy to him, and he had a deep affection for him. He saved his own life on more than one occasion, and when he discovered that John had died, he was distraught. He continued to live in the bush after that. John, he is the true example that the friendship between a dog and his owner is truly possible. This tall, brown-haired gentleman stands out in a crowd. He was Buck's guardian and had a lot of gold hunting experience. For them, there was no limit to the depths of their devotion. Because of his deep regard for animals, he was beloved by them. Francois, he was a strict man who often used his whip. When a dog stole Buck's meal while he was on a journey, he punished him quickly. Buck was considerate of him and provided for him. When Buck's paws were too cold, he rubbed him and even built him some little booties. Despite this, he and Buck had a mutual admiration for each other. Hal, Charles, Mercedes, they have a similar character so they can be analyzed like one. By showing out how little civilization meant in the bush, the author poked fun at the two of them. They arrived with little prior knowledge and as a result, made a costly error. Acrimony and finger-pointing were commonplace towards the end. They perished after falling into a river and becoming submerged. His mustache and golden hair belied his middle-aged appearance. A handgun and a knife were constantly at hand for Hal, who was just 20 years old. Mercedes was a gorgeous, but pampered, narcissist. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.